Welcome for the fifth DigiCafé, and I'm here with Daniel Erler, and we're going to really discuss about the relevance of cultural and also economic context in the local presence of EA employee assistant providers. And it's a theme that you can be a full day discussing this theme because it's so rich, but we're going to try to focus on the main issues. And I'm starting with a, first question, and we've heard this in a lot of conferences, right? EAEF conference, EPAS conference. Why does actually local context matter in our field? Daniel, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you, Liliana. Well, it's actually an obvious question or a good question, because I don't think that anybody would say that local context doesn't matter. I mean, everybody would say that it's very important, language, culture, and so on and so forth. But I do believe that there are very different ways to approach local service provision. And of course, one can, for example, have people speaking different languages in one centralized center and providing the services very well. I'm not judging it, but that's of course something very different than, from my understanding, when I talk about local presence, I always talk about, I really think about that you need to have your foot on the ground, a local presence, because that, of course, has a couple of repercussions on your understanding of the local know-how, but also of simply how you interact with your clients. Because let's say Germany is a federal state, and you can believe me that if you have a northern and a southern German talking to each other, there will be very strong differences just based on the dialects, and so of course that affects services. I'm not saying that it's not possible to provide good services there, but it does have an influence. But so I think that, on the one hand, why I think it's important to talk about this local presence and the context is because we also, as a company, my company, PME Familienservice, we are essentially a German EAP provider, but we are, of course, now also facing increasingly requests from our, let's say, larger clients to provide services across Europe. So they want services across Europe, either with our help, or they say, okay, we want services throughout Europe. And the challenge for us is, on the one hand, of course, that we're not present in all of Europe. Now, that would be solvable by looking for partners. In fact, we're doing that. But the problem then you have is, of course, that what do you promise your clients? Like, if they know our service in Germany, our services would, I would say, be very different to service provision I would be able to provide through a partner in France or in Italy, where I'm at the moment. And so that is a challenge, because we are, on the one hand, all EAP providers are faced with this increasingly the demand for, let's say, standardized global services at the same level, and that basically the same kind of services. But I do believe that that's not always in the best interest also of clients, because it makes no sense that you say, okay, I can provide you with this and this kind of services if in some countries they might not even be necessary. And I make a concrete example which comes from let's say the particular shape of my company. I mean, we as an EAP provider, we do not only provide financial, legal, and psychological assistance, and maybe also well-being services, but we are very much also on the ground with home care, elder care, and childcare service delivery. So we do that ourselves, and we also do research and referral in that area. And that means that we are locally present throughout Germany. We have around 20 offices with local staff, which is also on our payroll.
Yes.
Now, why am I? Sorry.
Just to clarify, so you're saying that your clients, that most of your clients are based in Germany, you operate in Germany with this diversity of portfolio of services, and you have your foot on the ground. But this need for interventions outside of Germany, does it also link to remote working, or no, not at all? It's the business that you work with, or the organization that you work with, that are demanding this type of services outside of Germany?
Well, we have two things. Of course, we have German companies who are asking us, okay, because they know us, can you also help us in various European countries? Not always all European countries, but where they have, of course, employees. And then we try to find ways and partners so who can help them with these services. But the other way around is, of course, you have global players, especially from North America, operating also in Germany. I won't name names, but I mean, they are large providers, and they basically have often the approach, I want the same kind of services throughout the whole world.
Yes.
And of course, from a company point of view, I can absolutely understand that, because if you have to already, Europe is a headache with these 30 plus countries, 30 different languages and all kind of cultural things you have to consider, and then also, of course, the legislative different frameworks. So I understand the need for simplicity for these global companies, but what I can make an example where it becomes very clear, and we often have American companies asking us in Germany to provide them with backup care. Backup care is basically emergency childcare services, so that employees can either ask for a home, a childminder at home, because they cannot ensure the childcare for their children for some reason, maybe because the creche is closed or whatever. Then we can do that. Or we also have childcare centers where you can bring your child on short notice for not of long periods, but let's say a couple of days.
Okay.
Now, in America, that's a very, very important service. Why? Because in America, of course, you have no sick leave or almost no sick leave for yourself, and certainly not for your children. And so what happens in America is usually that companies provide these kind of services, but they ask their employees to do a co-payment, so to pay to have a part of the burden of course, these costs. Now, when they come to Germany, these companies also expect us to say, okay, provide us with backup care. We can say, yes, we can provide you with backup care. But when it then comes to co-payment, we tell them, if you want co-payment from us, it makes absolutely no sense, because nobody will use the service. And why is that? Because in Germany, every parent has the right to 15 days of sick leave per year for each child. That means 2 parents for 1 child can have 30 days just sick leave for their children. And that means that, of course, if a parent has to pay for something where they actually then want to do their job, they won't. They will just take sick leave. And that's just one example. Of course, it's more difficult to bring examples when you talk about psychological assistance, but for sure, when you come about to legal assistance or also to financial assistance, the topics are very different. And so it's very important in my eyes to make aware also companies that understanding their desire that they want to have more or less also for equity reasons, they want to have, let's say, similar services, but do not claim that you can provide the same kind of services throughout the world, because it makes, in my eyes, little sense, because even in Europe, the services you need, where I'm now in the south of Italy, are completely different from what you need when you are in the north of Germany, no, for example. And that's a major argument I would do.
Yes, you mentioned a lot of, and also sensitivity to the context. I was just, at EAF, we've always been very verbal about the differences, and the fact that EAF was created based on this diverse approach to employees assistance service, and of course, cultural context and specificity beyond culture, but also the specificity of needs. But you also mentioned that you were the local presence has been very relevant also for your company, the fact that you're local. Where actually do you feel that this is very relevant for, providing the services that you provide? Why is this local presence so important?
Well, that's a good question, because of course also we are not immune to also cost pressures, and of course local presence is a costly hobby, let's say. But I think I mean, we work as a company, we work very decentralized. So we have these branch offices, and they have everything locally. So from sales to actually counselors and so on. That's all locally, and then we just have a central system where you can basically, we have a central hotline system, all these centralized systems. But when it comes to the local dimension, I think one of is communication. I don't know. I think most EAP providers will have the same problem. We have a lot of clients, company clients, and one of our challenges is that most of the employees don't know that we exist. That these kind of services we offer actually are available to them now, especially in the case of PME Familienservice, because we have a very broad, let's say, range of services. And so people often, they might even have had contact with us in the area of childcare, but they would never assume also with our name that we also provide legal counseling and other kind of things. So we need to get, basically, we need to raise awareness that we are there and that we provide services which are for free for the employees. And to do that, of course, one would say, it's no problem. You use the intranets and all the digital communication devices you have in the company. That is true. But first of all, I think all of us know it, that there's an overkill of digital communication. So basically, in this noise of digital communication, it's very difficult to get across the message that our services are there. One. And the second is that often, of course, you want to have strategies with your local people. Let's say you have a factory somewhere. You want to devise really with the people on the ground how you actually promote your services, so that you basically, for example, go into the factory, also into the canteen and whatever, and present yourself. And for that, again, it's not essential, because you can also subcontract it to somebody who does that. But in our case, we basically go into the offices and other locations with our staff, actually also with our counselors. And one of the trends which is interesting now, and that happened with COVID, everybody, including us, we thought, okay, let's say personal counseling where you meet somebody is dead, because everybody was doing video counseling and so on and so forth. But we are now seeing actually a trend backwards, that people want to come to our offices to have physical contact with their counselors. And also another trend is that we have increasingly companies who are asking us whether we can be present a couple of days per week on their premises, so that we basically have really somebody whom the employees get to know as part of their team. And of course, that for us is costly, but we do that because we've seen that it's a very effective way, especially if you have a cluster of employees in one place. Of course, if they are very dispersed, then it's much more complicated. But if there is a cluster, then that's a very effective way to get your promotion on the ground going. So and I think also, and then I'm
yeah, the close relationship actually puts you more aware of the context of work of these people, and also their demands or their needs, specifically in terms of the type of service that you might need to promote more, right? Because it depends.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And also then you necessarily, you also then have contact not with your main account contact of the company, but you often have with local HR, you also get into contact. And then you understand, of course, on the one hand, what are their concrete needs on the ground. And again, because we are also so much in childcare, I mean, for example, you can have a company who says, okay, I want a childcare center for my employees. And then the first thing you have to do with them is, okay, let's look at your employee structure, because maybe they have children in this moment, but until you open a childcare center for them, all these children will be old. So they're not, the childcare center will not be relevant for them anymore. So it makes no sense to do that. But for that, you need to talk to them, and you need to really get to know the local know-how. And on the other hand, of course, then the HR, the local HR people can also act more effectively as multipliers, because once you interact with them, they of course know better what you do, and then they will refer basically that to their employees, and also to the managers who basically lead the employees.
One of the things that I'm connecting here is the first DigiCafé we did the conversation with Maisie. And Dale Maisie, and she actually mentioned that she has a perception that actually employee assistance providers have been disconnected from the real context of work. And this puts, of course, a challenge to this model of business. And you are now illustrating your model of business, at least, the model that you've been developing for many, many years with your clients. And it's very high touch. You have to have your foot on the ground, you have to connect with the HR person, you have to engage in conversations to really, identify the specific needs and how can we better service this population, and not have standardized offers, as you mentioned. So it's quite of a tension, right? Because it's more profitable, on the other hand, to have a scalable, detached that can be provided elsewhere. But then your model actually brings a lot of engagement from clients and better service, better higher impact. Not necessarily, it brings some positive economic results. Otherwise, you will not be a business still. But how do you make this balance, right? How you keep things balanced in terms of, I have to employ these people, I have to connect with these local partners, I have to extend my network, because they're a threat to be disconnected from your clients, right? But at the same time, also this need for growth, right? The need to extend your territory of action and everything. How you balance those two tensions?
Yeah, well, I think one thing one has to understand with PME Familienservice is that we are essentially a family-owned business. So and the owners of the company have never had too high expectations in return on investment. And that sometimes can also be a disadvantage, but sometimes, of course, it allows you to take a longer term perspective. And so for PME, for years we have been thinking about childcare, elder care. It's really a headache because it's getting more complicated to actually find solutions, because mainly there are no childminders, and there is very little also availability of home care services, and especially when you're talking quality. So it's really a tricky, let's say, part of business. But we have then, again, we had these discussions, but we always came to the conclusion that for us is very important, because it's probably our main USP, is that we can say we are really also in a service delivery. And I remain still very firmly of the opinion that if one talks about employee assistance, one cannot essentially say, okay, we focus on this. But the main dimension, or one main dimension where, let's say, conflicts, problems, and so on arise, is of course the family dimension. No? And so you cannot exclude it. And that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that others don't do something like that, but I think that the difference between us and many others is that we really are still in the hands-on service delivery. And that makes us, of course, also when you look at the number of employees we have, we look like a giant from the number of employees. We have 2,400 employees now, but that's basically because we have a lot of childcare centers where you have a lot of staff. That though then also brings you again more to the thinking of a normal HR departments, because people management is a complicated thing. And if you have to manage a lot of people yourself, especially in childcare, then you get then also an awareness of the everyday problems. And that's also why we, for example, for years already, we have developed a executive coaching, as we call it, where we have our executives talking to other companies executives, and so really on a really practical experience, exchanging more or less ideas. Not that we give others an answer to the problems, but thinking of how one can solve solutions. So that is basically the advantage. But the disadvantage, of course, is that it's not only a cost question, but it makes you also slower. That's clear, because also because we have this decision that we really, on the one, we also don't have a local presence in every small town in Germany. So of course we also use external counselors and so on and so forth. But the core of our employees, our counselors, are on our payroll. And there is another major dimension on that, I believe, is the question of quality control. It is of course possible also to have high quality services with external counseling. But I would argue that it doesn't make your life easier if you have external counselors, because quality control becomes much more difficult, and especially, at least in Germany, because you have the confidential relationship between client and counselor, and so the actual control mechanisms are more complicated. And there we have the advantage that we have most of our counselors on our payroll, so we can work much more closely with them. And on average, I think that of course facilitates quality.
So also you mentioned you are also a social service provider. So that means that I think you mentioned something very relevant, that you address a very diverse type of needs, right? And childcare and elderly care, which have a huge impact on people at work. So, and sometimes we are much more focused on the issues at work, but actually, you know, all the work-life balance and the work-life integration dimension. And then, you know, if you don't have no one to take care of your children, or you have a sick parent that needs help, that needs support, that needs daily assisted service. But this also connects, you know, we've been hearing in our conference this year a lot about tech. So at the same time, very high touch, get your boots on the ground, talk to people, reach out. And on the other hand, you have a lot of conversation about AI and technology. And how do you see technology helping with this challenge of addressing the local context, addressing the local needs, of the specificity of the needs of your clients in diverse settings? How do you see technology playing a role there?
Well, I think if you look at what's happening at the moment with AI, but already beforehand, I think a major change for all EAP providers, including us, was of course COVID. Basically that video counseling became a very normal practice, and still remains a very normal practice. And there, I mean, if you look beforehand, counseling was mainly done either personally or a lot also by telephone. I would argue that on average, the video counseling already was let's say, an added value, because maybe some people also prefer just video telephone counseling, but many people also prefer, of course, the individual kind of where you can interact and see the other side. Now, I think what is happening now with AI is really the interesting question for all EAP providers is, what is if not now, but in, let's say, in 3 to 5 years time, and that's not something which is crazy. I don't know if you are you or if you are an AI. And what happens if these let's say AI, because of course we are also already involved in pilots where we see how AI counseling at the moment functions, and on a text basis, it's really quite impressive what they can do. I mean, what answers they give. They might sometimes still give answers which are not, let's say, appropriate. But also, let's be frank, probably also our counselors sometimes give answers which are not appropriate. So I think what we really need to think of as EAP counselors now is, if we have a perspective that in 3 to 5 years' time, AI counseling will be something which will be there. We might like it or not. That's another question, but you won't get rid of it. Unfortunately, that is not so easy. Then we need to think what can be added values to us. And PME, for example, what we did, we are not a high-tech company, but we have always been fairly technology-driven. And we have already since 2 years, we're in this field of trying a bit what is possible with AI. And we have recently launched an app which is called MindDance, where basically within this MindDance app, people can, on the one hand, help themselves, so to go through courses on all kind of issues, but they can also pick their counselors and personal counselors they want to talk to. And there we actually, what we did said, okay, what do we do if they don't know in 3 years time anymore if that's a person or an AI? So then we said, okay, you can actually choose a counselor near to you. So we also put the locations, so to make sure that they're real people. And then we integrate also an AI. Basically, at the moment, it's a bot which answers on a text-based basis, where you can ask simple questions, but where you always have the possibility to switch to a human operator, essentially. And so what our bet is, on the one hand, that we will need to integrate technology with personal services, because our company, at least, we have no intention for profit reason to replace all our people and just do it through AI, because we believe that there is a personal dimension and people want to talk to people. Might be also wrong thesis, but that's how it is. But if we want to do that, then we need to think of how can we do it? And there again, the local dimension comes in a lot more, because we see already that people are asking us much more than 2 or 3 years ago. can we come to your office? Do you have counseling office there? Also, because a lot of companies don't have office anymore, smaller companies especially, they do shared offices and so on and so forth. So that's not the ideal counseling situation. So they ask us, can we come? And then, of course, also all the other things which I said about that you are in interaction with your HR people on the ground of your clients, that will not go away. So I think really EAP providers need to think, and not for all that will be a viable solution, but whether it is not useful and sensible to think also that the local presence, to extend their local presence, where we'll never be able to extend
Magnify
your
also,
local presence to all of Europe.
and to
Course,
magnify,
but
I think, the local presence or the
sorry,
individual counseling, you can actually magnify your counseling
sure.
therapy. So imagine if you are using technology to reinforce, to give contact, psychoeducational contact, for instance, or you are actually guided by an AI to make better decisions, clinical decisions even. And we see this, that there are some tools that are clinically based, so based on evidence, and can actually, the same that we see for medicine, right? That doctors actually are consulting this AI because it researches, more recent papers, more recent guidelines, more recent protocols, and can give you actually a better and magnify your action. But it's interesting, as you mentioned, because AI, I think it's not against this customization, this capacity to fine tune to the local context. It can actually magnify our influence in the local context, right? Because it can bring a lot of information that can collect from the local context and can actually advise, even, a counselor that is not really there, but could give content to the counselor that he needs in order to improve his intervention, right? So it can,
Well, also sure, and also it can also help you. I mean, one of the challenges, of course, of human capacity is simply that if a counselor, I don't know what your experience is, but let's say a counselor does 25 counselings per week, then it becomes almost impossible to remember all the details of each counseling. Now, of course, one says one has a time beforehand, afterwards to basically prepare for your session and so on. But there, AI can be really very helpful because with AI, you can get basically a summary of the past of your discussions with the client. And so you can get the quick points. And then I think what really will be the challenge for us is to make render the main advantage of human beings an advantage, namely that human beings often, not all human beings, but most human beings like to interact with human beings. Yeah. And so to see really even more than now our employees or also our counselors, if they're not our employees, but the people as an asset, because in a world which will become much more digital necessarily, and where a lot of tasks will be done by AI, and quite a lot of them will actually be done better, or at least at the same standard than humans can do it. What is the advantage of human beings? It's the human interaction, and that's why I think also that maybe, but that's the thesis, might be also wrong. Maybe the personal interaction and the personal that you sit in one room and interact will become more important again. I'm quite sure of it. I know in our company it has been a reaction after COVID now, and all these video sessions. Everybody now wants to meet in offices, not so much for the everyday office jobs, but to meet other people. Yes, and that's really important.
They need presence, right? It's not just about because we are to overload. But there's several examples that you mentioned, and I think it's good cases, right? I think focusing ourselves in good cases of using AI, using this technology to magnify our capacity to reach out to the ones that we support, to communicate better in different languages, right? To rapidly could scale messaging and also admin work, which is always something, right? Even if you're you need admin, and AI can help with that, some automation, and you mentioned. And also I think these are good cases. Of course, it could be the other way around, and we use AI to eliminate all psychologists and legal counselors and but it will be harder for social services for sure, Daniel. You can't take care of a child with a robot or an elderly, right?
Not yet. So that's one of the reasons why we are also very happy at the moment that we have also different. I mean, we have always these kind of different pillars of our business, and that of course is also a kind of hedge against the risk that in AI things will change. But again, it sounds maybe like a threat. I don't see it as a threat. If we as a let's say in the entire how do you call it, all of EAP providers, if they all realize that technology can be, if used rightly, then it will be of advantage for the clients and also for us, but it needs to be done right. And like all companies also now, if you see some companies very hurriedly introduced the first AI services and then announce also layoffs because that's now, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, of course, it will not increase the acceptance among employees. If you say, oh, now we can replace 10,000 employees because we all do it through AI, then you don't have to be surprised if that then, of course, does not help you in convincing employees that AI can actually enhance also their work. And so I think that's what our challenge will be, and also with our counselors. Already, we also, in recent years, we've been putting a lot of because we have an academy brand, and there we have put a lot of emphasis on the aspect of blended learning. So integrating basically digital learning aspects with our coaches. And it's still very difficult to get our coaches to use these digital tools, because at the moment they're still, I mean, people are happy with the way they're, most of them are happy with the way we do our trainings right now. But what we are trying to tell them is that in a couple of years, there are new providers, and we've seen it also in the EAEF conference. No, there are all a lot of digital-only providers, and they mainly are not present at the EAEF, but they are not doing a bad job in many cases. So we need to move from that point of view. We cannot just say, okay, you there, that's only digital, and that's rubbish. It's not going to work like that, because even if I agree, the clients will not agree, and especially not the corporate clients. And so they will choose it, and then we need to have arguments why our services are still valid, and that would probably mean a better integration of our people services with digital services.
Definitely, and I totally agree with you. So I'm opening up the floor now. Thomas and Marta, please join us. And switch on your cameras if you can. I don't know if you can, but it will be wonderful to see your faces also. And if you're more comfortable, just put some questions on the chat, okay? But would be wonderful to have some questions or remarks or comments and join the conversation. That's the idea. Would you like, Thomas?
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Thomas.
Hi, we met in Prague too. Nice
Yes.
to hear from you today. Well, I think, yeah, we have to find ways to include it. It's the same what was said in Prague also. We need to find ways to work with what makes sense in case of AI. I might not, yeah, be the biggest fan of what our first step into working with AI at Insight, which means we are working with some possibility to also what you mentioned, that you also have in your application, this possibility to get brief first answers or ways to have a look on your situation in another way by the AI also, and then the possibility to go over into the counseling sessions if there's need for more, which I think seems interesting in the first place. And maybe it's good to have the possibilities to make your appointments later over a tool like this. But sometimes, it's what I also saw on the EAEF in Prague, is it's a little sad that well, it's good all the companies try something new, and we will have to see what works, and then the best will fall out in the end, or will get picked in the end. But all the EAP companies are kind of small in their ways, and this makes it hard, I think, to compete to companies which can throw a lot of money into new tools and AI contact or in a way on when you have a look on AI. I think it would be interesting to have some tools that yeah, as you said, that we can use to have less work, for example, like when you have like the first contact on the phone, maybe this could be a way to directly get, I don't know how to say that, to route people more fast into the areas that they need to or where they need help. But we can provide help, because at the beginning, right now, everybody is working with people picking up the phone, and
Still
I
the
think,
phone, right? So still the
yeah,
phone.
everybody. I can just imagine that nearly every company will get in the future more and more trouble to find people who do this job, for sure. And then I think this is a way where this AI could really help us in the first contact to route people, and so that you don't need employees to do this part.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree completely. I
Yeah.
mean, I agree. First of all, of course, it is a challenge, Thomas, for smaller companies, including ours. I consider ourselves a small company compared to global players. We are not so small because of our employee size, but in the EAP business, we're also just a small company in many ways. And of course, also for us, the technology investments we have been doing in the last 3 to 4 years have really hurt our profitability, and really hurt it. And the only reason that we're able to do that at the moment is because we're a family-owned business, where there's basically owners say, okay, we need to think of the future, and if that means less profits, then fine. But and that's a real challenge, and that's also what we're trying to do now. We're talking also with companies in other countries. Not only that we have partners when we get requests for service delivery in other countries, or vice versa, but also the idea that maybe technology sharing is one way to go forward, because again, the challenge, I think, for let's say traditional EAP providers will be that otherwise we will be overtaken by let's say new entrants who do everything digital only, and who then of course can not only be much faster, but often in technology wise also better. One needs to admit that, because they have more resources and more know-how in this area. And so that's going to be a real challenge. And I do believe that at a certain stage, of course, providers, especially in Europe, being so fragmented, we need to think of how we can share certain resources, because not everybody will be able to develop all these kind of things by themselves at a quality level. So at a level where you then can compare to the large, especially North American companies.
True, true. There's all. I also wanted to ask you something, Daniel. Looking a little bit at the future, we're seeing many employee assistance providers are already doing small tests and using and seeing the capabilities. Of course, they use shared AI services, right? So they use AI that is provided by big players such as Microsoft Team or OpenAI or others that are already in the market. But my question is, do you see a positive future for this adaptation of employee assistance? Do you see that even, looking at Europe, our context, the particular European context, do you see, are you optimistic that we will do this journey in a positive way, that will be able to integrate, even if it's not at a large scale in our business models or business provision mode? But are you optimistic? Do you see capabilities in the market, in the European market?
I think it's very difficult to foresee that, because also, of course, the tools on the market now basically often are, I mean, fairly simple to use them in the very beginning, right? So they are, if you look at every day, 5,000 new tools, and I don't know how many e-therapist tools come out every day. So I think, but that's not so much what I'm frightened of, simply because, of course, then and many people will not agree, but I do strongly think that we have in in Europe, we have a strong regulation on data protection on the one hand, and on the use of AI on the other hand. Now, many would argue that that is a disadvantage, but I only agree partially. It might be also, of course, that it limits you from doing certain things, but it sets boundaries. And of course, that means, for example, that especially in the area of counseling, you will need to think very much what actually do you input into a software, which basically is for maybe not even located in Europe, and which does not account for GDPR and other data protection measures, which in the counseling area are very important. So I do think that is a challenge, but also again for the small ones, because if they play around with tools now, I mean, what we are actually doing, one of the major problems we have, if we want to have AI accessing our centralized data of our clients, we need to make sure that that data remains on our servers, and that is so we need to install basically our own AI in our premises to process data and to anonymize data, or at least to not make it so easy for providers to actually see who is the user behind it. No, so and I think that's a major challenge. So that's going to be really also a question for smaller providers, because they might also be faster and then actually in the beginning have success. But then if they come to the larger companies who will ask them, what about GDPR? And they have to, because they all have to comply to these regulations, then it will become more complicated. So I think what I'm trying to say is on an individual or small provider basis might even enable them to be kind of speedboat wise to bring out services. But as soon as you come to the larger companies, it will become more complicated, because they will ask a lot of tricky questions which you will not have an answer to, and which we also didn't have answers to in all technology until we didn't have all these larger clients asking us questions. And then over the years, I guess like Insight and others, you simply say, okay, yeah, they're asking these questions, so we need to see how we actually deal with these issues. And that's for small providers impossible.
I don't know if it was you, Daniel, that shared that once you have a tech company that actually demanded in the contract that you would not use AI in your, I don't know. Yes, it was you, right? And I really so
we have several companies, and actually, but we knew that already, because I mean, now it's unbelievable. But when we introduced our first chat bot, which was not an AI bot, but it's a very stupid bot, like the bot I recently, when the CrowdStrike problem was there, my daughter was sitting in the airport and stranded. So I was interacting with a bot. That was definitely not an AI bot. I hope it was not a human bot, but I was really throwing my computer out of the window. Anyway, and so I think 8 years ago we started our first chatbot, and there we already had a lot of requests from corporate clients to not include the chatbot because of GDPR concerns. Now, our bot is GDPR licensed, but because in Germany you have this co-determination with an employee, so it's not so easy with larger companies to do certain things. And so having that, we have already foreseen that AI, we will always have, you can use AI, but you can also say you do not want AI. But one also must be honest, in the, let's say, medium-term future, it might be that it will cost you more if you don't want AI. Because it's going to be more expensive, and so then you will pay premium if no AI is then premium service.
Human, right?
Yes.
So premium will be fully human, and then low
exactly,
cost.
or something like that. And that's interesting, but yeah, I think that's gonna.
But it's true.
Which is also kind of nice possibility for the future. Yeah, we get ourselves into a premium section without doing anything, without changing anything. So maybe we don't need any change.
Well, I think that's a bit hopeful or wishful thinking, but I do believe that, as I said, I think humans like to interact with humans, and especially if you're not well. I mean, how many studies are there that simply the human touch, if somebody's sick and you touch the person, that makes a huge difference. So and these kind of things are so in the therapeutic area where we are talking about when we're talking about traditional EAP, no, then I think that will be play a major role. But it means for us the challenge that we have been used now for 20 years to deliver our service through telephone and video, and maybe we have to think in a certain sense a bit like the record industry, where they had CDs. and then CDs were replaced by digital, and now it's vinyl, which is of course a niche, but it's a nice niche and it's growing, and maybe
There
it's
are a lot
gonna
of
be like this.
vinyl consumers, right? And particularly, you know, like when they want to have the favorite album from the favorite artist, but it's still so a little bit like the old persists and it's kind of niche, but it's still relevant and could actually bring other opportunities. That's interesting. That's
And so, but that means also that, of course, as we are all do, I don't think anybody of us wants to degrow, so get smaller. So we will need to have both. We will need to have, on the one hand, still human counseling and so on and so forth, but we will need to embrace technology. And I think really, I think also inside, and you're also doing similar things, that you're looking for partners across Europe who doing just trying to build a European network, because another thing which I'm firmly convinced of is that for European service provision, and I would probably think that this is the same for Asia or for certain areas of Asia, because Asia is so huge, but in Europe that you need a distinct approach to EAP in Europe. You cannot go a one-size-fits-it-all service idea in Europe, because it cannot work. It's simply
true. And you've mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, even inside the country, there's difference, not just between countries, but also
absolutely.
inside the
Yeah.
same country.
It's
So
also interesting when we compare ourselves to other German companies, and then sometimes we get to know them and we talk to them, and then sometimes we go out and we sit together with our own culture and we say, how did they get the contract that we did not get with this company? And it's like, we don't understand it. It's so interesting that the culture in a company which does the same, we don't understand how they work compared to us. It's really interesting.
Yeah,
huge.
sure.
So thank you so much, Daniel, first, and also, you know, the ones that could join, Thomas and Marta. And it was so inspiring, not pessimistic, looking at the future, but we be open to actually learn with this technology to magnify, you know, the human impact, right, of our services, and to reach out to employees that actually have a very, very diverse types of needs, not just mental health, but also other family, work-life integration.
That's really, that's my main message. Do not exclude, in my eyes, the main stressors I have personally had in my life are family and other related things. And so excluding them, then it's partial employee assistance, but it's definitely not what employees need in total. They need really a full service, and that includes for me these points. But that's of course biased, because my company does that. So
and you need humans to provide the
absolutely.
the relationship that could be magnified in their impact through technology, of course, and we know
And that is also when I mean, we have now devised a AI guidelines for us, and we are because we are 2,400 people, so we have also our employee representatives. We work together with them, and one of the key statements of that is that it's not our purpose to replace human beings with AI, but to improve the services for our employees, and also to improve basically the working conditions for our employees. So that's the purpose. And I think really, if we want that employees accept and embrace AI, these services, we need to get them on board, and we need to tell them that of course, some jobs will go away. I've just had to talk to our interpreters, services, external service provider, and tell them that that's not something which we can really make use of anymore, because it's so good AI translation by now and so that's not. You will have changes, but if you tell your employees, okay, if there are changes, we'll make sure that you have other opportunities, then you will have more acceptance for these changes, and they will come very fast now.
Yes, thank you so much, Daniel, and
thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the 5th, and happy summer, because in August we will not have our DigiCafé, but we'll come back in September for the 6th DigiCafé. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.